All right, everyone. Welcome, welcome. So happy that you're here. Happy Tuesday. My name is Yasmine-Imani McMorrin. This is Connect with Yasmine. As you can see, I'm not coming from my traditional space at home in Culver City. I'm actually at my daughter's soccer practice, socially distanced, so I'm waiting for her outside of the practice. But so happy to be here. Just as you know, we're rolling with it. And during the day, I serve as the interim dean of students and director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at USC Gould School of Law. And for the city that we love, I serve as vice chair of the General Plan Advisory Committee. And I just wrapped up my service on the Equity Strategic Planning Committee with our school district. So if you're new here, Connect with Yasmines are just a way that we can connect with folks in my network, amplify topics and campaign issues that I care deeply about. And so we've been having them throughout the summer, now into the fall. So happy that you're here and that you're engaging with us. As you can see, scrolling below, there are the hashtag Team Yasmine, hashtag Vote McMorrin. So feel free to share out the stream with your folks or just to amplify it. We always want to make sure that folks know about our campaign and, are just engaging and connecting with us. Before we get started, I want to make sure to amplify that today is National Voter Registration Day. So we want to make sure that folks, especially our young folks, but really everyone is engaged and ready to vote November 3rd. So go ahead and check out lavote.net. Make sure that you're registered and update. And if you're voting by mail, just make sure we're getting our plans together and going to be ready to go November 3rd because it's so important, or even before then, right? Vote early if you can. So I definitely wanted to amplify that, make sure to take some time to do it. But yes, and I hope that you guys can hear me well and the connection is good again coming from the car. So hopefully we're not having any issues with that. But again, Connect Get with Yasmines are sort of a way to bridge the COVID gap that we are in right now. I was so looking forward to knocking on doors and being able to engage with voters on issues. So again, Connect with Yasmines are short 15, 20-minute ways and small connections with folks from my network, folks from the LA County area, Culver City and beyond on issues that we care about. So again, so happy that you're here and joining us today. So today our topic is disability and inclusion. Honestly, I talk a lot about equity, DEI. It's what I do during my work, and then it's what I want to see here in Culver City. We want to make sure that whether you work, live, learn, or play here, that you're being welcomed to a community that just welcomes where you have access to transit, where you have affordable housing, where you're treated fairly and equitably by all of our city services. So it's really essential to the core of what this campaign is about. And so I wanted to make sure to amplify, especially disability, because I think in the conversation with diversity, equity, and inclusion, disability is sort of the area that gets left out a little bit. So I wanted to amplify that. Wanted to make sure to bring on one of the best people in the world, I would say, another NLC amazing family member. He was my co-director during New Leaders Council in 2018, David Radcliff. He is a member of the Writers Guild of America and the think tank for inclusion and equity. And he's just all around. He does a lot of the social for our NLC LA page. And he's just an all around welcoming, outstanding person. And so welcome, David, the Yasmine today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for you and seeing you run around town and do everything at once. And I'm not surprised at all. And I really appreciate that you are open to having this conversation and expanding how we think about DEI issues.
Of course, it's so important. So I don't know, do you want to tell the people a little bit about yourself before we dive into the combo?
Sure. So my name is David Radcliff. I met Yasmine through the New Leaders Council for Progressive Young-ish Leaders, and I have cerebral palsy, which you may know from Breaking Bad, because that's what Walt Jr. had. And that's one of the very few examples of us in popular culture. And so as a member of the Writers Guild, I write for television and also for brands and businesses and nonprofits. And one thing I try to emphasize is the reality that as I grew up, I saw very few people like myself in media and also in all kinds of spaces, in business, in nonprofit life. But we're a huge community of people with disabilities, 54 million people in this country. And I like to say that it's the only underrepresented group that everybody joins eventually. And I think that COVID in particular is going to force us to reframe how we think about this topic, because a lot of people are going to be joining our group and might be doing so sooner than they planned.
Right. I think in NLC, I think that was the first time I had ever heard it being phrased that way when you brought it up that way, that like one way or another, you're going to join us. And I'm like, absolutely. Yeah. Like, why aren't we thinking about it more as, this is something that is, and, just even, I guess, how can we be a little bit more conscious, especially thinking about, let's just say in the DEI space, to just start there, how it really doesn't come up when folks are giving trainings or thinking about anything in this space. So how can we make sure that if like me, as I conduct facilitations, or if you just happen to be in the room, how can we make sure to not forget this incredibly important and this group that honestly we're all going to be in if we're not already.
Right. I think conversations like this really do help. And I think it's important that we think about disability not as something that is only a facet of aging, but for many of us is part of our life experience. Yeah. And it's not identical to race, gender, or sexual orientation, but it is similar in terms of how, in different facets, you and I can both come into a room and feel like we're not getting the full picture of how this person feels about us. And you can't put your finger necessarily on ableism or sexism or racism, but it's definitely there. And so I think it's important that that aspect of this conversation comes forward. And part of why I joined NLC in the first place is because I felt like it was a place where that kind of conversation could happen. And I think that what's happening right now, or at least what happened in the early days of this pandemic, is people got had fallen into the habit of saying, well, this really only impacts high-risk people. And when they think of high-risk people, they think of, anonymous faces and names and people that they'll never meet, and maybe often older people, but they're not thinking about others. And to be frank, my disability doesn't erase the privilege that I have as a straight white man. So I also have to be cognizant of that reality. Disability and ableism is part of the picture, but it's not, it doesn't erase all the other components.
Right. I think even so many people are not even thinking about that lens, like just how, and it takes time, right, to have that level of awareness. Like, I might be privileged in this space, but I'm not in this space, or I'm marginalized or oppressed in another. But I'm hopeful that as a society, we are learning more. We're understanding how systems of oppression works and all of those things. Something else I wanted to lift up, especially in this conversation, particularly with you, is that you are like a Twitter or social media like viral person. You've gone viral a couple of times, and I think that that's so important, particularly for the reasons in which why you've gone viral, and most recently to sort of highlight, we love here in Culver City. Also, we blocked off streets. We have tables and chairs out, so al fresco, and I think that's wonderful. But a tweet from you maybe a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, highlighted that tables and chairs were just blocking the way, and there is no way that I think either, I can't remember if you were on your crutches or in a wheelchair at the time, but you were unable to access and get through, which again, I think just highlights like we're trying to accommodate businesses and folks and keep folks safe. But again, we're not thinking about, folks who are, and I don't want to say most marginalized because I don't think that that's the right way to say it, but we're not thinking about everyone. We're not making sure
Right.
that folks who are not, just able-bodied and walking traditionally, we're not thinking of anyone else but that group. And again, that just goes to the level of awareness. But I just wondered if you could talk about that, and maybe, I think, were you being interviewed by the LA Times, and there was that picture of you.
Yeah, the photo of me
So
falling over.
I think it's good to amplify that because folks are not thinking about it, and I'm not sure if you planned it or whatever. But thank you so much for being willing to share your perspective and your experience, because it makes all of us better.
Sure. So you touched on two different issues that are somewhat interconnected. So there was a photo in the LA Times of me. It was not planned. It was very, it was very out of the blue, of me in my wheelchair going over some pavement by USC that was very uneven, and I fell out of my wheelchair. And there was a photographer there because we were doing a story on something unrelated, and he took the picture. And I knew as soon as he took the picture, it was going to end up on the paper, and that was sort of humiliating. But also, if it points to a systemic issue that people aren't thinking of, which is, a real threat to elderly folks, people with disabilities, then, I'm happy to fall over if it's helpful in that way. And the other was the table. As you mentioned, a lot of restaurants are putting their tables outside to still keep business going. And one thing that I think is important to think about is when non-disabled people think about disabled people, they don't think about them as customers. They don't think about them as business owners. They think about us as subjects of charity. But the disability community in America has $490 billion of disposable income. So, and again, when you think about that, this is a group that everybody eventually joins. There is a capitalist incentive to make sure that your restaurant or your business or any place is accessible to us. And usually what happens is that accessibility is put on as a nice to have after the building's already been made, or after the restaurant's already been laid out. Then somebody has to come along and complain before someone does something. So when you put the onus of responsibility on us or on future versions of yourself, where you just have to go around and complain for access, it just makes you look like a scold. And I don't want to be seen that way. So I'd rather people think about this stuff from the beginning. And I would also mention that, what's interesting to me is that a lot of times, and I do post a lot about disability stuff online, because I think, why not? People need to be thinking more about this. And often I get messages. From friends of mine once friends of mine become pregnant, because then once they have to carry a baby for several months, they think, oh, wow, this is a longer walk than it should be, or this is not a particularly accessible space, or this pavement is really obnoxious. So then they message me, and they recognize that this is, having and disability is different from person to person, but having a noticeable physical disability, whether you're coming into a job interview or you're trying to get around the city, is like being permanently pregnant. So you're just, constantly looking for the shortest path, trying to be pleasant to everyone, to get what you need. And so all that we ask is that people who don't have to deal with this stuff think about it, so we don't have to go around with a bullhorn all the time.
I mean, fair. I don't think that's much to ask. And I think this dovetails nicely into my next sort of question. And again, if there are additional questions, please drop them in the chat, because these are quicker questions. So I want to make sure if folks have questions of me or David, we make sure to put that in and we address it. So in terms of thinking of a city, thinking about accessibility, which is something that is incredibly important to me. And I'm so, and this is a weird way to phrase it, but I didn't really have anyone in my life that had sort of like a permanent a physical disability, right? And I feel like my relationship with you and learning from you, either in person or on Twitter, really opened my eyes to just how I don't think about, sidewalks, or thinking about, again, like seating, or just any of those. And it's like, it shouldn't be that you have to have close or relational proximity to someone to sort of,
Right.
be engaged or be thinking about equity in the terms of planning or thinking about how city government should be run. So when thinking about like a city like Culver City, or thinking about how can we sort of get in front of this. And I do want to shout out our disability committee. We do have a city committee that does elevate and think about these issues on the city level. So I don't want to, just make the assumption that we don't have any folks who are working in this, and folks at the senior center are also engaged in doing really important work. So I definitely want to shout out those folks, especially in light of just everything that's been going on. But if you have any tips or recommendations on how we can show up a little bit better, especially as we're seeing more al fresco, and I'd like to see that, right? I want to make sure the businesses are supported, but like, how are we? Because it's hard to be ADA compliant if we're in this new, this setting that no one really saw coming, right? So it's like all of these things we're sort of dealing with on the fly or as they come, and again, the question of who is in the room and who has the power, right, typically are the folks who are making specific decisions. So I just wanted to elevate that, and thinking about on the city level, like, how can we make sure that we are hearing from folks, that we are thinking about folks, and making sure that folks are a part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think in every business or in any public policy space, there should be folks with disabilities. And because that sort of, my best friend from high school is an architect, and we talk about this because from his perspective, he's trying to get a building built. And from my perspective, I'm trying to get in it. So it's important to have our voices in those particular spaces. And I think public policy areas are an area where we don't tend to be seen as often, and frankly, a lot of people don't want to admit that they have a disability. So opening up these conversations is really important. One small thing, well, it's small to people who haven't thought about it yet, but it's not small to a lot of disabled folks, is that if you look at the way that most housing is designed, almost every house of people that I know who own homes has stairs in front of the front step, or in front of the house. And since I haven't had a car in the last couple of years, so I've been using my wheelchair a lot more than my crutches lately. And that's when I really started to notice everybody's got steps everywhere. It's just sort of it's the water that we're swimming in without thinking about it. So just kind of and I'm as guilty of this as anybody else, because I have I have the privilege of being able to hear, but I have friends who are deaf. And when I go to an event and the event is not well lit, that means that my deaf friends can't read lips effectively. And that's something where I'm suddenly like, oh, wow, I hadn't thought of that before. So, opening up our social media diet to get more perspectives. There's a woman named Imani Barbarin on Twitter who is a Black woman with cerebral palsy, I think, and she has an amazing perspective on the intersection of race and disability. So I would encourage people to follow her. There is a question in the chat real quick. In terms of, can I speak to people with disabilities as being inspirational? I don't know if we have time, but I have a lot of thoughts on that. The gist is that it's not, the short story is, if you're saying that I'm inspirational, then you have to also say what I've inspired you to do and why you found it inspiring that I was here. Being inspired by somebody showing up to work or going to school or dressing themselves or leaving the house is not functional inspiration if we're not like pointing to something that they've actually done. And so the general theme of inspiration around disability is really problematic, because if you're impressed that I just got myself to the interview, then why the hell would you hire me if the baseline is in that position? So how about designing homes without stairs? That would be a good idea.
And let's please stop sharing those videos of children hearing for the first time. I mean, that's what I'm learning. Like, I didn't know that, but let's stop doing that.
Yeah, that's an area where I don't feel as comfortable speaking because I'm not deaf, but I do know that folks, the decision of whether or not to get a cochlear implant is a really personal and intense decision. And I know people who are deaf who have lost friends over that decision, because for deaf folks, deafness is a culture, it's a language, it's a perspective. And so basically what the mainstream media is inculcating by sharing those images is this idea of fixing disability, which for a lot of disabled people is problematic because it means you're just trying to erase something that is fundamental to who we are. There's a question here. Business interests often get a lot of attention. How to elevate the voice? Oh, wow. How to elevate the voices of individual citizens. I mean, we've talked a lot about the challenges, but one of the pluses in COVID for people with disabilities is that businesses are now forced to reframe the idea of working from home. Yep. And that's something that a lot of disabled people have asked for years and have always been told that, it's not the right company fit or culture fit. Now it has to be a fit because the rest of you need it. Right. So within that reframing comes a lot of both responsibility and power. And it's going to open up how work gets done and who gets to do the work. So that's one way to empower everybody individually. Hire people with disabilities because we've been waiting for this moment and we have skills and education and capability.
Yeah. Dope. All right. Jen, David, is there certain legislation nationally or locally that we can be supporting that impacts folks in the disability community? And I did not prep him for this, so I don't know. Sorry,
well, I'll tell you what's on my mind right now. What's on my mind right now is the fact that we are really on a precipice with this Supreme Court seat coming, which is likely to be filled by a justice that has real capability to undo my capability to get health insurance. Because even as a healthy person with a pre-existing condition of cerebral palsy, if pre-existing conditions go back to making my insurance unaffordable for me, and if we know that most disabled people don't get hired full-time in businesses because of the ableism that we've been speaking about, as long as insurance is tied to the economics of a business, that is bad news for disabled people. And if the Supreme Court decides that pre-existing conditions are a non-starter, that puts me and a lot of other folks in a tight spot. So.
Yeah. So if you needed another reason to vote, please.
Yeah, that's why I've been tweeting so much.
Ooh, we cannot do another 4. We cannot do it. So, well, I don't want to take too much of your time. I don't know if there are any lingering questions from folks, but I'm really, really thankful of you sharing your experience, your expertise. It's incredibly important. And I know it feels like such emotional labor to do so, but I just want to thank you for just being transparent, for advocating, and for just being your full self in all spaces. It's something that I try to do. You definitely do it, and I'm so grateful for your friendship and grateful that you took the time to come on and connect with voters here in Culver City, and thank you so much, David.
Thank you. I'm so excited for you, and everything you said is absolutely mutual, and I wish that I wish you could copy yourself and install yourself at various places in government.
Oh, let's just focus on Culver City for now.
We need more Yasmines.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Ellen, for being here. Thank you again, David.
They're asking if I want to. Sorry, they're asking if I want to share my Twitter handle. It's just my name, David Radcliff. Please, yes. David Radcliff.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully, maybe we can add it in like the comment, or we can tag it in the stream so folks can directly can follow you there also.
Great.
So thank you again, David. Thank you again, everyone, for participating and connecting with me. Oh, and we have the Twitter handle ready to go here. Thank you so much, Kareem, behind the scenes. I want to make sure to let folks know that we have office hours coming up on Thursday. Folks are still able to sign up, I believe. You can sign up on our website, which is votemcmoran.com. There'll be a place, I believe, for you to sign up there. Office hours are Thursday from 5 to 6. We also will have a town hall centered on public safety on Saturday at 6 p.m. we will have an attorney, a student local leader, and a police officer and pastor who will be a part of the conversation with us on Saturday at 6. I also want to amplify the SIP for our schools, which is also taking place on Saturday, I believe, at 6:30. So we're gonna, if you plan to come to the town hall, we're all just gonna go a little bit late to the SIP for our schools, but we also want to make sure that we're supporting. So I think those were all of my announcements. I always leave something out, so please make sure that you engage with the campaign. Follow us. Join our mailing list. Again, you can find all the information on votemcmorrin.com. And just thank you so much. We are, pulling up to November 3rd. It'll be here before we know it. So I appreciate any donations that you can provide to the campaign, any ways that you can amplify. It really makes a difference and make sure that we're able to get the word out and really connect with voters. So thank you again so much for being here. Thank you for giving me grace as I navigate this first connect with Yasmine from the car. Hopefully it will be the last. But thank you so much. I hope you all are safe and well. Take good care, and hopefully I will see you on Thursday office hours or on this Saturday town hall. Thank you so much, guys. Take good care.